everyone. I'm Karol Weyman with Outdoor Coffee Shop. Welcome to another edition of From the Ground Up. I am here with Jameson Allen from Flash Weather AI. It's great to see you again. How have you been? Why don't you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing very well. It's finally warming up a little bit here in Iowa for the weekend. And my name's Jameson. I do business development for Flash Weather, trying to get the word out about what we do.
Yeah, that's great. So this podcast is going to focus on how to rethink weather risks and thinking about safety beyond like the standard safety that everyone thinks is important. Because I think there's a whole list of other safety things that Jameson is going to talk about. So what are the main weather-related risks associated with just outdoor labor?
There are quite a few, and it totally depends on the industry. The main ones are going to be, number one, lightning, and not because it happens the most often necessarily, but because it is the most devastating when it does occur. But close behind that is heat risk, heat illness. And that one's been hard just because we haven't had a lot of advancement in the technology around how to monitor and then getting that laid in with regulations. But you've also got wind is a huge deal when it comes to cranes and scaffoldings and boom trucks with big boom arms like concrete. And then also really when you have sudden out of the blue rain or anything that comes with that storm, you know, lightning's usually a part of it as well. Those are all very dangerous depending on what is going on, who's where, and what's supposed to be taking place. And at the end of the day, the problem with all of them is that we're making reactionary decisions. We see something and then we make a plan, or then we have to go do something. For the first time in history, what we're trying to do with those weather parameters I've just listed is we're making it possible for you to be proactive on all of those incidents.
Yeah, and that's great. And I know that OSHA has regulations, and they have a whole list of things that need to be checked off when they come to a site or when they look at things. And so how is heat risk determined by OSHA, and do you think it's adequate?
Yeah, great question. There's a couple angles here. So, and I'm not super well versed in OSHA directly, but I will say most of the people I talk to in the industry who have to abide by OSHA, they're not always clear on, am I within that threshold? Am I doing the regulations right? Am I taking the temperatures correctly? And that's because they're not meteorologists, right? These guys they're trained in a whole host of other things, but they are not a meteorologist. And so, you know, one of the things that you have to do is use what has been standard for a lot of years, and it's called the heat index, right? I'm sure we've all heard of that. It's kind of like when you say the heat index is such and such temperature and it's, you know, 8 degrees different than the actual thermometer is saying the temperature is.
Yeah, right.
Yep. Yeah. The problem with it is it's only taking into account a couple of weather parameters to get you that factor. So there's a new tool that's come out in the last, it's probably been around for a while, but it's finally becoming a standardized tool, and it's called the wet bulb globe temperature. And this is a factoring that takes into account way over double the number of weather parameters. If I remember right, it's 8 or 9 different components, things like solar radiation, the actual temperature, the wind, the humidity levels. There's so many components that go into this so that you're actually seeing a data point that truly represents how a human is going to react in that environment, in that heat. So much different way of looking at it, and it's a lot more precise. The problem is you have to have a big, fancy, expensive thermometer device, and you have to run it correctly. You have to keep that thing clean and calibrated, and it takes more than a couple minutes. It's quite a process to run that device. So you can already start imagining the things that are like that slow down on a job site when you're like, well, we don't have the reading yet, or maybe we got a reading but it doesn't line up with something, or somebody still got hurt even though we took the reading. That there's just a lot of issues with getting that thing standardized across the board. And I don't think OSHA has required the use of the wet bulb globe temperature yet, even though it is a much, much more precise, safe way to monitor heat risk.
So you said that there's a bunch of different kind of factors to be able to determine that. So, you take an air temperature and it's a certain, that's easy to see. Can you elaborate at all on what the wet bulb temperature, what it takes into account?
Yep. So number one, you get temperature, just like anything. And then you add to that the wind factor, because that's going to have a cooling effect. And if there's no wind, obviously your wet bulb globe temperature goes up. There are things like humidity in there, because again, 80 degrees in Iowa when the corn is 8 feet tall is a different kind of experience than in San Diego, right? Totally different. So humidity is a part of that factor. Direct sunlight, so solar radiation and cloud cover and how those impact what you're experiencing. And there's the scientific part of it, the bulb concept. It's one of the things that's, I believe, measuring. It's called the black globe. I'm not the guy to explain that necessarily scientifically, but that's pulling in a lot of those factors, like even the angle of the sun, right? So if you've got a 5 o'clock wet bulb globe temperature, it starts to decrease pretty quickly because you're losing the direct angle of the sun. So, and there's more to it, I would imagine, but I'm not the scientist. So I just know that we need the data to provide information to the people in the heat in a way that's much easier and more accurate.
So can you give an example of what a wet bulb event could be and why it's dangerous, just to kind of get an understanding for our viewers?
Yep. So, let's imagine a job site in Florida. You've got, a bunch of concrete trucks out there. You got people everywhere, and it's starting to push 102 degrees, and there's no clouds, and there's very little wind coming off the ocean. What starts to happen to the human body in that scenario initially, you're just like, well, I'm just feeling a little tired. Or you're sweating and you're like, it's Florida, it's fine. Well, you become at a very high risk of heat illness, or worse, other things can happen. You can, heat stroke is something that can happen. The problem is, if you don't know what's happening to your body, if you don't understand how it's going to react to those heat incidents, you're actually going to push the line way too far. And when it comes to big companies who are hiring people to work on these job sites, they're liable for that person's injury, whatever happens. And so there's a whole lot at stake. And when you have, let's say, I don't remember the threshold exactly, but once you get into the 91 degrees and up in wet bulb globe temperature, those are severe wet bulb temperatures. And that's where you start to get, you either have to take more breaks, spend time in the shade, drink more water, or eventually cancel everything. And this has been implemented, I don't want to say across the board, but almost across the board in athletics. So high schools, universities, they're using the wet bulb globe temperature all over the place in the USA.
Well, and it doesn't just affect one person. If someone's on the job and they're doing something and they're not feeling well, they're not going to perform well, and they're putting other people at risk, and they could hurt the job tremendously, kind of irreversibly if they're not looking out. So yep. I think that it's important for companies to consider too when they're thinking about how they're going to measure that. So we talked a little bit about heat. So if we could talk a little bit about the lightning, and how is lightning risk determined by OSHA in a similar fashion, and is it adequate in your opinion?
So when I joined in with Flash, this was one of the first things I checked into. I wanted to know, hey, if lightning prediction exists, what does OSHA have to say about that? Well, their blog articles and safety articles still, and I think the most recent one was from 2 or 3 years ago, they all still say that lightning prediction does not exist. And so you have to kind of default to the 30-30 rule is what they call it, which we're all actually pretty familiar with. And that's saying, hey, if you hear thunder and count 30 seconds, or you see lightning and you count 30 seconds and you hear the thunder, well, that means it's within reasonable distance to cause a threat. And so then you're supposed to wait, once you do see lightning, you're supposed to wait 30 minutes before you go back out. But if you hear another thunder roll, see another strike, you start that 30-minute timer over. That's still pretty standard in a lot of places, including outdoor athletics and the construction industry, because that's all we've had. But truthfully, based on the science of lightning, that's kind of like throwing a dart at a dartboard with your eyes closed after turning around 3 times. It's just, lightning does not have that kind of, I don't want to say it's inconsistent, but lightning's not that simple, right? So OSHA really, they say there are things you can't do during lightning, but there aren't a lot of hard and fast rules around determining where the lightning is so that you know when to delay, when to pick back up on work. Does that make sense? Oh,
definitely. Yeah. So there's a lot of inaccuracies through that type of method. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like, you know how things are simplified for kids? It seems like that's a rule that's like simplified for children. And it's really, that can really be very dangerous, you know, count to how long, make it 30 minutes, everyone get out of the pool, etc. You know, it's like it doesn't really, when you're saying it and how you're saying it, knowing that there is such a better way to do things, it doesn't really make sense that is what we're basing it on. And I'm sure that there's probably events that have happened based on the OSHA rules that probably didn't backfired a little bit on them too. I mean, and I know OSHA does a lot, and they, they're in existence for so many reasons, and there's so many areas that they have to cover. So this isn't really about an OSHA thing. It's about making sure that, we're educating the right people so that they know that there's a better way. And there is, lightning prediction, such as what you're saying. So, yeah. So obviously, we know that the 30-minute rule for lightning safety, it doesn't follow science. So can you give an example of how you guys are able to predict that a little bit better and how you're doing it?
Absolutely. I'll start with a story here. And we put this one on our blog just because it really illustrates the difference. So in Kalispell, Montana, let's see, this was 2024, if I remember right, in the fall, there was a soccer practice happening at a high school. You had a soccer coach, and I think there were 5 student athletes on that field. It was a turf field. They saw lightning, and they went indoors. Check 1, right? You see lightning, go inside. What is it? The old adage is, when thunder roars, go indoors. That's like, yeah, right. That's our lightning prediction before flash. So that's what they did. And then they counted 30 minutes, and they hadn't seen or heard anything. So of course they go back out on the field. And as I mentioned, it's turf. So it had also rained. Lightning hit the field. And because of how it's built, it was technically conductive. And all of them got sent to the emergency room because of experiencing that charge. So 2 problems. Number 1, they waited until they saw lightning to go inside, which means when they saw that first strike, it was already dangerous. So they're standing on a field in danger. Thankfully, nothing happened then, and they went inside. But then they used a 30-minute rule to go back out, and it sent them to the ER. The reason they got hurt is because they used the 30-minute rule. Okay, but the caveat is, what options did they have? There wasn't another option unless they had used flash. So we went back through our archive data to see if they had used a flash subscription during that storm, what would have transpired? Well, number 1, they would have had over 30 minutes of warning for the initial strike. So they'd have a timeline, and they would know, hey, in about 12 minutes, that's when we're going to have to be done practicing and go inside, because after that moment, the possibility of lightning begins. So we would have eliminated that early risk that they took. And then they would have, their pin on the map on our dashboard would have been in the red for a lot longer than 30 minutes, which means we would not have given the all clear. They would not have gone back onto that field. And from what I understand, I believe our team donated flash to that school after this event, just because it was like, that's terrifying. You don't ever want to see that happen again. So, that's the difference, right? Where one is reactionary, you're waiting and then deciding based on what you see, sight and sound. The other is, hey, there's something like Flash that exists where we can tell you at all times, anywhere, when lightning is possible and when it's no longer possible.
Well, I think of the preparedness for, for job sites or for schools or for, for sports, golf courses, et cetera. I think, people are worried about, we want to make sure we're on time to have to redo this game or to, we're going to fall behind on this schedule. So everyone's anticipating, the worst case scenario, like we have to get back out there because we're going to fall behind and it could ruin a critical path, a schedule, something that's really very important to them. But if they knew ahead of time, they could have said, oh, you know what? It's going to be okay between 7 and 9. That's when we should do the pour, or this is when we should do this, or this is when we should do this. So, having that information allows them to be prepared, to be proactive, and maybe not fall behind in their schedule, and as a result of just not using the data that's in front of us, it is going to be reactionary and people will fall behind and there will be problems. So I think that there's really, it's interesting that there's all this data available. I think it would be great if you teamed with OSHA because I think there'd be so much that you could be able to do with that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, is there any other experiences that you want to share with us, or is there anything else related to heat and lightning, or some of the other areas that have weather risks? You had mentioned wind and other things. Do you want to expand on any of those?
Sure. There is one more story that it really helpfully, paints this picture even a little more. So this one does happen to be a golf story, it is outdoors, but it's not necessarily a construction or landscaping. So the Travelers Championship in 2024 was one of those events where it's a big public event. You've got a paid meteorologist on site, and he's probably got some truckload worth of gear that they're using, and they're calling that event to make sure that all the spectators, all the golfers, everybody's safe. Well, he'd given them about 70 minutes. He said, you guys, we've got a storm rolling in from the northwest. Looks like about 70 minutes out before we're going to have to shut this thing down and evacuate for a while. And then lightning hits a tree on nearby one of the fairways, and pieces of that tree blow off and they hit a couple of people and send them to the emergency room. So this time they didn't experience the charge, but obviously a tree hit them. Everybody recovered and survived, which is great news. But this is painting the picture of why Flash is different and how even as something as sophisticated as having a meteorologist still doesn't do what we do, because they're working on or working off of many times data that's not as updated, not as frequently refreshed. And then, when you bring in new data, you then also have to apply it to your algorithms. You have to reset the forecast that's going out. And it can take anywhere from an hour to 6 hours before some of these other radar systems update. So you could, for all intents and purposes, be making a decision on weather data that's 3 hours old, give or take. No wonder so many people get stuck in rain showers that they're like, yeah, this came out of nowhere. This wasn't on my radar, but it's in the sky and now we're soaked and we're not ready. We're reacting and we're kind of caught red-handed, if you will. So with Flash, we update that lightning prediction tool that we built every 2 minutes. Wow. And I laugh because I'm like, there are mountain ranges worth of data. I mean, we can't even imagine how much data is being operationalized here. But on top of that, we do it every 2 minutes. So you're never behind. Our accuracy is absolutely through the roof so that you can, one of the things that I think about for this industry that we're talking about today is the emergency action planning, right? You have to have an EAP, you have to have all these plans, but if those plans are only ever as good as the data you're using, right? So if you only find out about lightning once it occurs, well, you're still clearing that job site inside of a lightning threat instead of before a lightning threat. And that's the true danger. And I believe that 8 out of 10 lightning related incidents occur on the first strike in the area.
Yeah.
Which is relatively obvious. It's the first one. No one saw it. There weren't any previous. It's just suddenly there. Boom. And once it happens, we all know what to do. We skedaddle. We named it Lightning First Strike because we predict that first strike with 99.6% accuracy so that you can actually have a protocol in place and everybody's clear before it happens. And we use the same algorithm and tweak it a little bit to give you the all clear so that you're not waiting around for 2 hours wondering, well, is it safe to get back out there yet? No, the minute it's safe, you get an alert from Flash and it says, essentially, lightning is no longer scientifically viable at your location. You can get back to work.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. And so I think you mentioned that you have a meteorologist on staff. Did I hear that at some point?
Many. I'm one of the only ones on staff who's not a meteorologist, actually.
Wow. So, how large is your company? How many people do you have working behind the scenes to make sure this product goes well?
Between development, meteorologists, sales, and leadership, we have, I think, around 25 people working right now. And we're growing regularly. We're always adding to the picture to make this thing more effective on a lot of additional levels, even than when you look at our products even a year ago, the increase in how it looks and functions is unbelievable. So we're moving quick.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know that you had also talked previously, when we had our conversation previously, I know that you guys have an onboarding process and you help people be able to make sure that they have, the best service possible from you guys, and you check on your clients, et cetera. And are they able to get updated equipment as it comes out, or how does that work for you, for your clients?
Yep. So everything is subscription based, and we're actually about to release an admin portal. Right now, I would set up the clients, create their accounts, and make sure they have access. But we're starting to flip that so that they can go in. The admin person can see, all right, I've got these 10 slots. I'm going to put Jim in here for the next 6 months. He needs access and he needs these features. So you're only paying for the stuff you're really using. And at all times, you can tell who's got access to what. And then if you got to add stuff or you want to change it, it's really easy to do. So anytime a new product rolls out, you get to see it. We tell you about it. And I think usually within that first year, it's just included. But when we reset the contract annually, we'll make sure that everything's still up to date. So lots of new stuff rolling out pretty regularly with this platform.
Yeah, which is great. And it just shows the dedication that you have, that, I think when you talk to companies and they're content with what they have, you realize that they are not innovative and they're not going to grow. And that is absolutely not the case with your company and the people that are part of it, which is the backbone of Flash Weather AI. So that's really impressive. Is there, obviously there's your website, people can get a hold of you, but what's the best way to just reach out to you guys and be able to get information on your products? Yeah.
I think usually the best way is just reaching out directly. You can get to a sales rep through the website, but I give people my email and phone number all the time, because what I've learned is with technology like this, in an industry like this, it takes time to build trust and to build that relationship. And we don't assume, hey, you should just trust us. We said it works. I mean, we know it works, but we know that leap, right? To implement some kind of innovative technology, it can be even with something like OSHA, there's a lot of days and months ahead for us of helping them update regulations and make sure things actually fit the science of it all. So yeah, reach out to me directly. You can find a sales rep page on the website, or anybody on our socials will get you directly connected with me and our sales team.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, Jameson, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm so glad that we were able to talk about, heat and lightning. And I know that there's so many products in the pipeline for you. And I look forward to hearing about all of them in the next coming podcast that we do with you. So I want to just thanks for joining us today. And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk to everyone soon. And thanks again for joining us on From the Ground Up.